Hi guys, this week I spoke to comedian Matt Green about comedy, Boris Johnson, and if satire can survive these crazy times. Make sure to check him out on social media, links are in the description. Hi guys, so I'm here with Matt Green, the comedian, who's very famous on social media and is in particular on Twitter and YouTube. Matt has been very kind to speak with me today. Thanks so much, Matt.
No worries.
Would you give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself, how you got involved in comedy in particular?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I was always interested in doing comedy stuff at school, university, did sketches and did various writing stuff and performing. And then I've been doing stand-up since about 2003-4, all around the UK and elsewhere as well. And also doing acting and writing and making little short films and things. And then it was really when lockdown happened, nearly 2 years ago now, that it sort of, it felt like if I was going to keep doing comedy, I'd have to find something else to do, because obviously live shows weren't happening and there weren't really very many live online shows. Those began to be a thing and I did some of those, but initially anyway, there was nothing. And after the first couple of weeks, as I think we all were a little bit sort of shell-shocked by it, I kind of started dipping my toe into making little videos, and I made a few of them and some of them went quite well and some people quite enjoyed it. And I sort of kept making them and trying different formats and different subjects and working out what kind of stuff I enjoy talking about. And probably about the last year or so, I've really started focusing much more on political stuff, satire, making topical videos about what's happening in the news, government, generally what's happening with COVID and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a real sort of journey of kind of finding what works and finding the audience as well. And I think that's what I've really loved about doing online shows, online videos rather than sort of live shows, because obviously a live show you're playing to whoever's there and you've got to try and read the room and work out what they're interested in, not interested in, and that's part of the skill. But that does mean that sometimes you can end up having to kind of have a fairly broad approach, that you can't pick on specific things, and you can't really. It's quite tricky to talk about politics that much in comedy, sort of in sort of stand-up comedy, because you're always going to be playing to people who either aren't interested or maybe have a totally different view or don't want to, listen to an argument about it. Whereas online, obviously, you can find the people who are interested and just play to them. And that's been a really, really great thing about my experience, really, yeah.
Really good, really. And did you have an inspiration to enter comedy? Was there a particular comedian that you were inspired by?
I mean, I think I loved all the classics, I guess, of my era. So I grew up watching, Monty Python and Fawlty Towers and Blackadder, Not the 9 O'Clock News, those guys. Also huge fans of stand-ups like Eddie Izzard. Used to watch their videos all the time and kind of got obsessed with kind of being able to repeat almost word for word what they were saying. And also like I think as I got to sort of teenage years, then the kind of Armando Iannucci lot kind of came along, and Brass Eye and Day to Day and Alan Partridge and Spaced, and I guess then sort of kind of People Like Us and things like that, and sort of all of those sort of shows were always a big inspiration for me. So I've always enjoyed the kind of slightly wordy, sort of slightly intellectual, slightly political, if not party political, then sort of satirical edged comedy. And and that's sort of what I've ended up doing online.
Very good. For example, over the last number of years, we've seen how people like Trump and Boris Johnson in particular have their own style of politics, but have they rendered satire dead, or is it becoming more and more difficult to make fun of people like this?
I think, I think it is different now. It is difficult. I mean, I think one of the kind of evil genius moves of Trump, and to some extent people like Boris Johnson as well, is that they realized that they could use laughter in a cruel way. Particularly Trump. I mean, I'm not sure Johnson quite fits this mold, but certainly Trump. I don't think I ever saw him laugh. I don't think he laughs, but he's good at making his audiences laugh by being cruel, by being nasty, by being sort of by sort of punching down, as you'd say, on sort of protesters or Hillary or whoever it was at the time. And so they found the kind of the secret of crowds is humor. You know, humor is a very powerful weapon, and I think if it's used in a sort of, it can be used in a negative way as well as a positive way. So I think it does make you more aware of the fact that just because someone's laughing, that doesn't mean that they're sort of they're a good person. You know, so you can laugh in a bad way. People can laugh in a kind of nasty way or in a kind of mocking way. And so I think if you're doing comedy about it, you do have to sort of think about that a bit and think, okay, who am I actually targeting? Am I making sure that I'm laughing? You know, hopefully you've got to think about who the target is and what you're trying to get the audience to think about. And if you want them to laugh, what are they laughing at? Are they laughing sort of at that person or with them or because of them or despite them? And so, like someone like Trump or Johnson, in my case, more, I do sort of take the piss out of his kind of speech and the way that he talks in a kind of all that kind of stuff. But I don't kind of lean on that. That's not the main thing I'm talking about. I want to talk about what he's actually saying and what he's actually doing, because that's, I think, where the real kind of satire is. And if you just talk about his silly hair and his silly voice and stuff, you're missing the real story.
That's a question I'd like to ask. How much do you think of Boris Johnson is real and how much is fake? Because of course he has this persona of, you know, ruffle the hair or whatever and talk in a weird way. But how much of that is real, or do you think any of it is real?
I don't know. I mean, I've never met him, and based on what people have said about him, I think he seems like someone who's pretty happy to play to the room. You know, he's almost like a comedian. You know, he can read a room, he can see who he's in front of, and that's one of his great strengths, but also huge weaknesses as a leader. Like as a politician, it's a strength to be able to make the people in front of you like you. But if you're then constantly changing your mind and changing your perspective and changing what you're going to do, because then the next room is different people, then, you know, there's nothing at the end, there's nothing at the bottom of what you're doing. And I do think that feels like that's been quite a strong part of his career, really, that he's been sacked for lying from newspapers and magazines. He's clearly had a fairly turbulent personal life. He's betrayed all sorts of people politically and personally. And I think he clearly is someone who has always been in it for himself and has always been in it for power. I mean, there's that sort of notorious now, infamous thing his Eton housemaster said years ago in one of his reports about how he was someone who didn't think the rules applied to him, or, you know, he didn't understand that he had to also obey. You know,
from someone at Eton.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, Eton's a school that I've never been to it, but I know one or two people who have, and, you know, they've always said it's a great place to be educated, because it's, you know, obviously there's loads of facilities and all that kind of stuff and history. But yeah, exactly. Even at Eton, even at a place which is used to dealing with people who are pretty posh and pretty kind of confident and full of themselves, he stood out as being particularly difficult and particularly happy to be seen as the kind of someone who was going to be going to the top and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of it was, I'm always a bit wary when people say, you know, it's all planned, everything's planned, everything's an act, because I think it's because that can turn, if you're not careful, that can sort of turn into conspiracy theory. That this idea that, I mean, in fact, I did a video about it a little while ago about dead cats. You know, everyone talks, everything's a dead cat. Everything that comes out, every story's a dead cat. It's a dead cat. And it's like, well, no, not. It's just sometimes things are mistakes, and people make mistakes, and even the most clever, well-planned, organized person makes mistakes. And yes, they can then sometimes sort of exploit those mistakes and utilize them and use them in a way to their advantage, but that doesn't mean that they set it up to do that. And I think it's the same with Johnson. I don't think he's someone who, I don't think he is a particularly sort of organized person, or I don't think he particularly plans ahead or has this great idea of what's going to happen in the future. I think he's very good at reacting to circumstance, and in the same way that I think Trump was like that. You know, Trump didn't seem to know what was going to go on from day to day, but he was good at reacting in the moment and playing to the crowd and all that kind of stuff. And yes, he had some people around him who were better at that, but as I say, it's both their big strength and weakness, I think, as politicians.
Okay. Is there anything from Boris Johnson's government we've seen over the last number of years that you would consider beyond parody? Have you seen something that you're like, okay, this is, I can't even make a joke about this?
I don't know. I mean, people ask me that all the time. And like the other day, I did tweet, "Oh, I give up," when his one of his ministers said that he'd been ambushed by a cake, or ambushed with a cake or whatever it was. And I was like, I can't. I mean, that's just that is a line from a sketch or a line from a whatever. But we're living in this weird world now where everything feels like a line from the thick of it or the sketch.
I don't know if you heard. Yeah, just today he said something about rhubarb. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen that yet. You see, that's the thing. I'm not. Yeah, I'm sure I'll pick that up on Twitter because what's funny now is that because I've been doing these videos a while now, people now sort of link me to stories and go, "Oh, you must do something about this or do something about that," and yeah, sometimes it's just so bizarre that you think that's in itself funny. Like there's nothing, you can't add anything onto that. But I suppose what I've done in that situation, I guess, is I've tried to kind of take it sort of zoom out a little bit and go, okay, well, that's ridiculous, but let's just zoom out a bit and see why he said that and what's actually going on. And I think you can always, what I've started quite enjoying, basically, particularly when Boris Johnson does a speech, I'll watch the speech and I'll make notes and I'll just use lines that he says in the speech as the sort of structure of the sketch, and then put other lines in between that are my jokes. And it's funny, and people often say, well, I can't sort of tell the difference. And that's in a way the fun of it, is going, well, yeah, he genuinely said this, but he didn't say that, but it sounds like something he could have said, or he's saying something, I'm making him say something that I think that he thinks in his head, in his inside him, he's thinking, this is what I actually mean by this, and I'm sort of bringing that out. So I think even when they say the most ridiculous things, you can find a way, I think, of kind of coming at them from an angle. I think the harder thing is when they do things that are so awful, like when they do things that are so sort of unbelievably cruel or thoughtless. Various bills going through the House at the moment about protesting or the immigration stuff, and some of the kind of anti-refugee legislation is just so horrible and so mean and clearly playing to the worst side of some of the electorate, that is harder, because I think there's a temptation to sort of parody that, or sort of just show that and say this is what they're doing, but it's kind of hard to make that funny, and it's hard to make that amusing without somehow exaggerating to the point where it's ludicrous, and at that point maybe you're losing the point you were trying to make. So in a funny sort of way, when they say silly things, I can use that as a starting point, but when they're genuinely cruel and horrible, that is a harder starting point.
I'd like to get to go into that a bit more detail after. Just as we're talking about, you see something on Twitter or whatever. Are you like a one-man band, or do you have a team behind you? And how do you manage to get the content? Like, because recently I saw some of your videos where, I saw something on Twitter, and within a few hours you had a video on it. And how do you organize? How do you write the script? Do you have people helping you out, or how does it work?
I mean, I'd love to say I had a whole team of of writers and producers and researchers. I'd love that. That's the dream. No, it is just me. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm quite addicted to Twitter and to the news. I always have been, and I make notes and I have ideas and I think, oh, that might be a thing, and I sort of wait for an idea to strike, and I wait for a connection to be made, or okay, well, I guess I could put that with that, and then that would become a sketch. And actually, more recently, I have been sort of setting myself the challenge of it. Okay, well, I feel like there must be a sketch in here, and although I don't have the idea yet, I'll just start writing and see what happens. And that actually does work quite well. It's the old thing of, if you want to be a writer, just write. Like, you've got to just make yourself do it. And because what I'm doing is topical, there's always new material, there's always a new angle, there's always a new thing to talk about. But I just write. I write quite quickly. I redraft it a couple of times, but I've started trying to not sort of second guess myself too much. Just go, right, this is what I'm doing, and try and make it as tight as I can. the thing about Twitter videos is they have to be 2 minutes 20. That's the kind of limit. And I found that a really helpful restriction, because pretty much every sketch I'm doing, I can get in 2 minutes 20. And if I can't, I should probably redraft it and make it shorter. And occasionally, if it's like based on a speech or something, sometimes I'll have more material. So I'll do a sort of an extended cut for YouTube, which is fun. But normally when it's like a specific little sketch, I think 2 minutes 20 is plenty. And I now know roughly on the page how long that looks. And so I kind of don't have to do too much recording and checking it and all that. It's like, okay, that's about a page and a half, 2 pages. And then, I just, I have a little studio in my flat. I mean, I say studio, I mean a green screen and a couple of lights and a tripod and a couple of, I use my phone as my camera, and I've got some microphones and, all that stuff. And then I edit on the computer, and I've kind of got reasonably just quick at it. So just sort of, I know roughly what I'm looking for, because I do all my own editing and stuff. I know when I'm performing it, if I perform it with a slight, if I slightly kind of stutter on a word, or if I'll immediately do it again, because I know that, I'm not going to use that take, I'll use the next take. And sometimes that means, occasionally that means that I get it wrong, and I get to the edit and I've missed a line, or I've forgotten to say something, or I've said every line I've said in a weird way, like one line I've said every time in the weird way or something. And then occasionally I have to go back and re-record it and retake and stuff. But mostly, I just kind of do it quickly. Because I'm using a green screen, I have backdrops ready to go, and I grab an image off the internet and then I mess with it a bit on Photoshop, or I use a bit of clip art or whatever it is. So it's fairly rough and ready. Like, I don't want to kind of, I'm not trying to make every video look like a short film. I think that's part of the, I'm trying to make it look, good. I want it to look nice and good production values, but I don't want it to kind of look like I've spent 3 days editing it and grading it and all that kind of stuff, because that's not what the internet's for. It's for making stuff that's quick or the kind of stuff I do, and get it out there. And speed is of the essence, as you say. I think I've got it down to probably, if I've got the idea, I can probably write, record, and edit and get out a video in probably 4 hours, 3 or 4 hours.
Oh, really good.
Which is, if I'm working fast, and I like to think of it, it's probably about a day in total if I'm working at sort of normal speed, if I kind of have a few ideas and then a couple of drafts of the script and stuff. But if it's something that's just happened, like it's a kind of big story that's just happened, and I think, there's an obvious joke there, I'll try and get it out as fast as I can.
What do you think of other comedians maybe who are online, like Led by Donkeys or Rosie Holt, Room Next Door? Do you have an opinion on some of those, or their styles, or have you got some inspiration from them as well?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think Michael Spicer's Room Next Door was definitely an inspiration early on. I think his stuff's great, and it's a really funny idea, and it's a really clear, simple way of doing it. And I think, he found a way of making not, things that weren't funny, as it were, in themselves funny, which I think is always great. I mean, I think someone who there are other people. I think Rosie Holt's brilliant. I think she's going more in the sense of she's trying. I don't know if she's deliberately doing this or not, but she kind of often does stuff that almost looks genuinely real. I
think a few Tory MPs were actually caught out by.
Absolutely, and several times. Particularly there's that one recently where she did the Sky News interview, I think it was, and as though and I'm going to have to ask Sue Gray if I was at the party, and so many people thought that was real. And I think that's great. That's a really funny angle to be taking. I think I've always slightly shied away from that and sort of deliberately put backgrounds up that are clearly not quite real, and obviously because I'm often in my sketches I'm talking to myself, you wouldn't think that was a real sketch, a real person rather. But I think that's brilliant, and the fact that she does that and that people genuinely believe it is very funny. I like him. I think also people like The Pin were a big sort of inspiration early on, because they're a double act who do sketches, and it's not particularly political, but they were quite early on. They started making sketches in lockdown, and they were sort of making them over Zoom and stuff. And I sort of watched those and thought, oh yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you cut between things, and you can make it look quite clever, even if you've just got one person in a room. So they were and their stuff's brilliant. That's really funny. And there's some other guys. I'm trying to think who else. Like Eleanor Morton's very funny. Sean Burke, who's an Irish comic, he does lots of really funny stuff. And there's loads of others. Yeah, I think that's what I think it's great. I think lockdown has really sort of expanded the reach of those people, and someone like Alistair Beckett King, whose stuff is insanely well produced. Like, he's an incredible animator and green screen user, and every time one of his clips come up, I'm just like, this is Hollywood style. It's incredible. Like, just a little 2-minute clip, but it looks perfect. I'm always very impressed by that stuff, and I think it just goes to show there is a real sort of creator community out there. And there are people like Larry and Paul and the Exploding Heads and one or two others who do sort of similar-ish stuff to me, like the sort of satirical, topical stuff. And we had a meetup a few months ago in London when they came down to London for a bit, and it was really nice just sort of seeing all these people in real life in a pub and sort of going, oh yeah, we're all real people, and we're all sort of talking about how we do it, and how we should all sort of work together and stuff. And it feels like there's a kind of a new little community building up, which is lovely.
I'd like to ask something maybe a bit more serious about comedy. For example, the so-called cancel culture, and your opinions on that. For example, a few years ago there was Jerry Seinfeld in the United States who claimed that he was afraid to do stand-up. He was more afraid to do stand-up in college campuses than in a bar or in a nightclub. Do you think this is a real issue for comedians, or is it just something being blown out of proportion?
I think it's a difficult question. I think people are more aware than ever. Audiences are more aware than ever of lots of different sort of identities and minority groups, and you don't want to look like you're punching down. You don't want to look like you're attacking any particular individual or group for their identity. And those identities are obviously, there's far more out there now than ever there were that people have become aware of in the last sort of couple of decades, I guess. And so, gender, sexuality, race, religion, ethnicities, all these different things are swirling around in a way that, maybe 20 years ago, a comedian could go on stage and talk about those things and not really worry about it and sort of think, well, if those people are offended, it doesn't really matter. Whereas obviously, because of now, we've got Twitter, we've got, everyone's got a camera phone. If you take something out of context and you put it online, that could really, mess with someone's day, if not their whole career. So I think it's difficult. And I think, I suppose as a comic, there's an instinctive part of you that wants, free speech to be the bedrock of everything, that you don't want to censor or tell people what they can and can't say. But I suppose, the question is it cancel culture? Is it consequence culture? And I think I flip-flop on that. Like, there are times where I think that's a reaction that's way more than it deserves. That's way out of proportion for some people. But then other times I think, well, actually, they've managed to get away with this for years, and perhaps a little bit of a pushback is not the end of the world. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't come down firmly on one side or another with that argument. I suppose that's a fairly sort of wishy-washy way of looking at it. But I think as a comic, because I've been working as a stand-up for years now, my personal feeling is you want the audience to have a nice time. Like, sounds like a stupid thing to say, or an obvious thing to say, but some people don't think that. Some people are like, well, this is my space and I'm going to say exactly what I want to say. I don't care what you think. But I've always thought, no, I do want the audience to have a nice time, and I don't want them to come away feeling attacked or belittled. If I'm comparing, which I do quite a lot live in London or wherever, and I'm talking to the audience, I don't want the audience to sort of feel under attack or feel like they've they're responsible for the laughter in the show. It's all my job. And yes, I might ask them questions or something, and I'll use that as a sort of springboard to improvise. And I might be a bit cheeky or a bit roast them a little bit or whatever. But I'm never doing that in a way that is hopefully anyway. I'm never doing that in a way that is sort of cruel or I also think there's a huge difference, as you said before, about punching up and punching down or punching sideways. So in the sense that, like, if you look at some of the roasting that Ricky Gervais, for example, delivered to American actors,
These are
Yeah.
completely different to the average person on the street, or
Yeah.
somebody with a disability, or somebody from a different gender. That's completely different to calling out, for example, Brad Pitt or Clint Eastwood, for example. So I think, there is, as I'm not as well versed on comedy as yourself, but I think, I think maybe I don't want to. I hope that comedians are not self-censoring in the sense that they don't want to offend anyone, but I think it's important that there is punching up taking place, like, because there are people like Boris Johnson, and I think it'd be terrible if we were not allowed to criticize him or make fun of him simply because he's Boris Johnson.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think punching up is always the way that I prefer to go, and I don't think it. I think some people think of punching up, punching down as being a kind of an absolutely iron law that you mustn't ever punch down and you mustn't ever punch sideways or whatever. And I think, well, no, that's, sometimes you create a character who punches down, or you even use punching down as in a sort of almost like an ironic way to show that what you're doing is actually punching up or whatever. And sometimes it's just funny to say the, Ricky Gervais or Jimmy Carr or people like that, who I don't necessarily always share they're not necessarily to my taste always in terms of what they do on stage, but I can totally see what they're doing. I can see that they're using their status to sort of say the awful thing. They're sort of saying the horrible thing that you would never say out loud. And that is funny. There is something funny in that. And as long as you don't think they're saying it in a genuinely hurtful, horrible way, I think, that can be hilarious. It's when it slides into being hateful or horrible, then it's more difficult. And then we're back to Trump. If you're saying something on stage simply to get an audience to laugh at another person in a sort of nasty way, with no empathy, with no humanity, then you're then in the realms of sort of rabble rousing and demagoguery rather than comedy. Because in the end, comedy is about making people laugh. And it's about you bringing your personality and your empathy and all that sort of stuff. And if you're trying to always remember who the victim is and who the target is, and make sure that you're targeting the people who are in charge and the people who are have the power and all that stuff, then that's how you stay, I think, in the right frame of mind. And I think if you end up getting distracted by other stuff, that's where the danger ends. That's where it can lead to.
Okay. Thanks so much for your time. I just want to ask you one more question and then I'll let you go.
Sure.
For example, Boris Johnson, is he going to stay or is he going to go? We don't know. But who would you like to see from a comedy point of view replace Boris Johnson? Jeremy Hunt, maybe? Brexit hardman Steve Baker?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, either of them. I mean, I don't know. It is the old thing of, it's like, I think we are totally allowed to find it funny what's happening with Boris Johnson. I think it's hilarious that he's wanted his whole life to be Prime Minister and has had about 2 months of being Prime Minister before a pandemic hit, and then it's kind of completely screwed up. But then Brexit was why he became Prime Minister. That's the thing. He got Brexit done and all that, whatever that means. But he's ended up in a situation which is far beyond his capabilities, and he's totally screwed it up in lots of ways, and tragically and horribly. But there's something sort of darkly funny about the fact that he never got a chance to do anything before this thing happened, and he's been totally out of his depth. So, and yet you look around the cabinet, I don't see anyone else who's got any leadership capabilities, really. I mean, I think obviously Liz Truss is being touted as possible. I can't. Every time I see her, she just seems like a complete void of personality and of ideas, and clearly again hugely driven by personal ambition and vanity, and I don't see much else there. Rishi Sunak seems very inexperienced, very new and very inexperienced. Obviously got that job slightly randomly after Sajid Javid left, and again got thrust into this hugely complex situation with the pandemic, and was very popular for a while because of furlough and everything. But every time I've seen him on the screen, I just think he's not particularly charismatic, and he's just very inexperienced. I think he's been shoved into a very leading role, I think, before he's got it. And maybe I don't know, maybe he'll grow into it perhaps in some way, but I just don't see it. And I don't know, Jeremy Hunt, I don't know. I mean, as far as Tories go, perhaps he's a bit more sort of rational and a bit more intelligent or something. But his time at Health was not exactly covered in glory, and no. He was there a long time and did a lot of pretty terrible things and didn't really solve any problems. So, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. In terms of who would be funniest, I don't know. I someone like a Steve Baker would be funny. Like someone like that to come through from the kind of ERG realm would be sort of funny in a dark way. Because again, I feel like someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg or those people they've had so much power without responsibility for so long. They've had so much kind of wagging the dog. They've been, the ones driving the sort of Brexit process forward and driving the anti-lockdown and all that kind of stuff forward. It felt like I always felt like, I can't remember who used the expression, but with Boris Johnson, someone used the expression that he felt like the dog who caught the car. That he was always the one who was yapping and sort of making fun of stuff, but then suddenly he's the one in charge. And I feel like the same thing sort of would happen if any of that lot got involved. They would be the ones who they're always shouting from the sidelines, but actually with any genuine power or responsibility, I don't think they'd have any idea what to do with it. I think they would very quickly become very unpopular because they believe in this sort of, they're so focused on this kind of very libertarian, very, freedom to do absolutely anything you want, and no one should have any restriction on their freedom, which just, when you're in the middle of a pandemic, just doesn't work. And even when you're not in the middle of a pandemic, it's still hugely damaging for a lot of people in society. Some people get very rich and a lot of people don't. And so, yeah, it feels like they would struggle. And what I want for the next Tory Prime Minister is for them to not have a good time. And then maybe we might, who knows, we might end up with a different leader.
Yeah, somebody will hold them to account. So, Matt, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me today. How can we find out more about you? About where can we follow you on YouTube, on Twitter?
Well, Matt Green Comedy. That's the thing. That's what I'm on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. And my website is mattgreencomedy.com. So if you want to find out what else I've been up to, you can see me doing gigs and all the various bits of acting and stuff I've done over the years. Come and find me there. Fantastic.
I'll leave links in the description of this video, so do check them out and do follow them. Thanks so much, guys. See you soon. Thanks so much, Matt. Once again, Matt.
No worries. Thank you.